Hello and welcome. So massive and all-encompassing is David's, no, not what you're thinking, pod empire, that he doesn't even have to be on the pods now. Yes, what you're seeing now is the first franchise, the first Heart and Hand franchise, and it's a sort of Scott's Thoughts thing. My own personal view is the reason David didn't really want to get involved is because, as they say, success has many fathers and failure is an orphan. And I think he's waiting to see how it goes before he takes any sort of claim or credit for it. And if it dies a death, then he can say it was really nothing to do with him. But let's hope it doesn't die a death. Hope it's quite informative. I'll give a bit of background to what I'm doing, of course, and why I'm here and why there's no David. So bear with me, okay? Okay, so the reason I'm doing the pod is because I took a break from the main pod. As you know, I've been over it 1,000 times. But I was getting a bit fed up with Scottish football, with Rangers, Ground Zero, Groundhog Day. Enemies on every side, club seemingly incapable of fighting back. And I thought, what did I love about the pod? What did I love about football? And it's still funny stories, foreign leagues, foreign climes, people playing football at much lower levels maybe, away from the glare of the spotlight, away from the multi-millionaires. I still just like football. I like hearing anecdotes about it. I like seeing how other people play football or support football, how other countries organise their leagues, how other people participate. And I thought, like a sort of a giant sporting integrity mixed with a catch-up of leagues about Europe, leagues about the world. And I thought I would just indulge myself a little bit. Asked David if I could do this sort of Scott's Thoughts thing, and he was up for it. So this is another one of those. It's a little instalment of Scott's Thoughts, and I suppose it's Scott's Thoughts 3, which isn't easy to say. So what we're going to talk about tonight is a little catch-up on the Asian Champions League, and then a preview to the Libertadores Cup, which is the South American version of the Champions League. I will start with a little catch-up on what we talked about last time, which was the Asian Champions League, and the first leg in Saudi Arabia ended 1-1. Urawa, my boys, Urawa Red Diamonds, scored first through Rafael Silva, and late on the home side equalised through Omar Kribin with his 10th goal of the tournament. So the home leg to come in Saitama, you'd expect Urawa to win this, and I hope they do. But you can keep up to date with that. Urawa are certainly favourites now to pick up their second Asian Champions League. So I'll keep you posted about what happens in the second leg. And hopefully you found that quite informative and interesting. And hopefully you find tonight's about the Libertadores just as interesting and informative. Because there's a lot to talk about and it's quite a trophy. So I think tonight we'll discuss mainly the Libertadores Cup. The Libertadores Cup has been played on and off since 1960. So it's one of the oldest club tournaments in the world. And it's been through various formats and various times of year when it's been played, but generally now it's settled on a format not unlike our own Champions League, with qualifiers, group stage, knockout stage. It's the basic background is it's very competitive, and I'd say at the moment it's more competitive than our own Champions League. If you're looking at sort of a snapshot, let's take from 2010. Okay, so this decade, there's been semi-finalists from 7 different countries, and the semi-finals themselves have been played out by 24 different clubs. And if you go back a decade, so that's 2007 onwards, there's been a different winner every year, including smaller clubs like LDU Quito, San Lorenzo and Atletico Mineiro, and only Boca Juniors, who are a giant club, have reached the final more than once over the last 10 years. I think this is an openness that the Champions League itself lacks. And part of the reason is that money here is a leveller. Unlike money in Europe creating super clubs and have not, in South America still it's generally have not. Most clubs through corruption, bad management, hemorrhage money and sell players. So if you can keep your team together and marshal your resources, you have quite a good chance. And it prevents the big clubs from Argentina and Brazil romping away with it, because they always have to sell. They always have to pay tax bills, do up their stadiums. There's always something preventing a club having a hegemony. which I think adds a lot to the allure. And you'll see from this year again, it's two clubs which you wouldn't necessarily have expected at the start of the season, which is what most people want from a tournament, and again, which is what the Champions League lacks. It's a very popular tournament. In fact, not to generalise, but most teams prioritise it. If you get in the Libertadores, you go in it to win it. The old system, in fact, it was played in the first half of the year. So a lot of countries in South America used to have a Apertura and Clausura championship twice a year. And a lot of teams, if they get in the Libertadores, would just abandon the Apertura and concentrate entirely on the Libertadores. And even now, one of the teams we'll talk about in the final, Lanús, they've been resting players for league games, not European ties. And I think that's quite common. So that shows you that the attraction of the tournament is that teams will prioritise it if they're in it. Maybe that's because the same teams that aren't in it every single year, and it's harder to win because it's much more open. So if you get a chance, a run at it, then that tends to become your priority. Crowds are pretty big. Maybe not as big in the group stages as our own Champions League, but the footage I've seen of the knockout stages, it's full houses, home and away. So yes, it's also appreciated by the public. It's a big tournament, and I think it's got that heady optimism that maybe the old European Cup had, where a lot of teams thought they could win it. Teams may prioritise it, and they were immortalised if they could win it, rather than some teams be cannon fodder and some teams expect to be there, and there's no real excitement generated in either party, which of course is a shame for the people viewing as well as the people participating. So what I'll talk about next is the finalists this year and the possible chances of who might win it. The final is played on a sort of home and away basis. The first leg is tomorrow night, 22nd of November, and the second leg is next week, 29th. The two teams involved are Lanús of Argentina and Grêmio of Brazil, which slightly goes against what I was saying earlier about the bigger countries not monopolising, but neither of those teams is necessarily the team you'd expect to have made it from those countries, and neither are the biggest teams in those countries either, which again probably shows you the strength and depth of those countries, but also the chance you have to win it if you can come through the group stage too. Our first finalists are Lanús. They're based in the city of Lanús, just south of Buenos Aires. They're not one of the traditionally big teams in Argentina, but they've got a long history and have known success more recently, after a long, steady and well-structured return from the brink of disaster. As recently as the early 80s, they were in Division 3, had only 1,800 members, and debts of $3 million, which is a lot at the time. But the fans, owners and creditors decided to start fresh and get together rather than being at odds. And by 1986, the club was in the top flight and had 27,000 members. They didn't arrive in the top to stay or to compete until 92, when things picked up with the appointment of Hector Cúper, which many of you will remember as a manager with Valencia and Inter. He arrived and they became sort of regular fixtures near the top of the table. They won the 1996 Copa CONMEBOL, which is now the Copa Sudamericana, which is their version of the Europa League. By 2003, they'd paid off their new stadium, which the members paid for themselves, and more money was spent on scouting, youth systems, and also, interestingly, they do a lot of charity work in the city of Lanús. They're very well known for helping out with homeless, hungry kids, orphans, and often they give away more money than they can probably afford, or should, which is also nice to see. They kept improving because of this infrastructure and the availability of money, and won their first ever league title in 2007, which was the Apertura. The coach who won that was Ramon Cabrera, and he was vital. His legacy basically was professionalism, and believing that they deserved to be there, believing they could take on the bigger clubs, and believing that they were worth their place at the top table. Since then, they've won the 2013 Sudamericana, and then they won the 2016 Argentinian Premier League, which I will discuss at later Scott's thoughts exactly why the league has changed its name and why there's not an Apertura or a Clausura. And I have to say, well done to Lanús for winning it, because I can't even understand it. So I'll explain later at a different pod what Argentina thinks it's doing and is trying to do and how it came about. But Lanús came out on top of the massive bun fight that is the new Argentinian Premier League, and so they qualified for the Libertadores. The stadium holds about 45,000, and it's imaginatively titled the City of Lanús Stadium. It's much higher for bigger games, like their derby, or Clásico is against Banfield, and it's called the Derby of the South of Buenos Aires. Again, not original. Their average is about 17 to 20,000 though for league games, so about half full. But they have sold out all their Libertadores knockout games at home. The coach, Jorge Almiron, he's a 4-3-3 man, a bit like our own Mark Warburton. In the big games, he tends to go 4-5-1 though, and pull his defensive line deeper, and that is the one problem they do have, because their striker is a legend, club legend, Jose Sand, but he's 37, he's not very mobile, and when they play their away tactic, he is isolated, and they struggle to score a bit away from home. In fact, they rely quite often on stirring fightbacks at home, or keeping the scoreline to 0-0 away from home. They can struggle to actually create much away from home. All of the ideas in attacking verve come from their two wingers, Acosta and Silva, who plays wing-backs away from home and out-and-out wingers at home when they push forward to play much higher up the pitch. The group stage was straightforward for them. Then it became a bit tighter. They beat the wonderfully named the strongest of Bolivia 2-1 on aggregate. Fellow Argentinians San Lorenzo on penalties after 2-2 draw. Again, they lost 2-0 away and relied on a 2-0 win at home. And again, they lost to the strongest away as well. Then they beat River Plate in an incredible tie. They lost the first leg away, River, 1-0, and didn't have a single shot on target. They were 2-0 down at home and hadn't registered a single shot on target either. And then they scored 4 without reply and scored from their only 4 shots on goal over the 2 legs to win 4-3 and reach the final. So it shows you that when things go right at home and they click with the crowd behind them, it's great, but they can struggle to create chances if the other team is pegging them back. They just struggle to get out, as they say. And that may be the one thing. They'll be looking for the first leg in Brazil tomorrow night to be tight, and they'll be looking to get a 0 in front of Grêmio's name. I think that will obviously be the tactic. Get them back to the stadium and try and do the damage at home next week. Who they're playing Grêmio. Grêmio are from Porto Alegre in the south of Brazil. It's a very European city. About 80% of the population are descended from Europeans. It's less stressful and busy than its northern neighbours, and by Brazilian standards it's considered leafy, white, middle class and safe. Grêmio's rivalry is with Internacional, and the great story they tell about this is they won the first game 10-0, and so easy was it that the Grêmio goalkeeper started talking to fans behind the goal and not actually standing in his goal because Internacional couldn't get forward out their own half. So, and they like to tell the story continually, and they have banners about it and songs about this, about how their goalie basically chucked it to go and chat to his friends in the crowd. They've been organised for a while, professional for a while, and are obviously in all the early leagues, but success took a while. In the 80s, things started to kick on for them. They won the league in 81. In 83, they won the Libertadores Cup, beating Peñarol. And then, famously for them, they won the World Club Cup by beating Hamburg 2-1 in Tokyo. And both goals were scored by their current manager, who obviously is a club legend, Renato Gaucho, also known as Renato Portaluppi. He scored both goals against Hamburg, so he'll always be remembered, especially again if he wins it as a manager. The Libertadores this week. I guess it can't do his legendary status any harm. He has played for everyone. He's one of these typical Brazilians. You might remember Renato Gaucho. He got 43 caps in the 80s and scored for Brazil. But he played for Grêmio, Flamengo, Botafogo, Cruzeiro, Atlético Mineiro and Bangu, and back to Fluminense and then back to Cruzeiro. One of these Brazilian careers where they just swap teams. After 1984, they reached their second Libertadores final in a row, but lost to Independiente of Argentina, and the good times began to end. In 89, they won the Cup, their first ever Brazilian Cup, and people thought this was a continuation, but in fact, by 91, they were relegated, and the good times had well and truly gone. The revival came when it did, under someone you'll all know, Big Phil Scolari, who won the Libertadores in 95 after finishing second in the league in 94. They beat Atlético Nacional of Colombia. But all anyone remembers, the game that everyone talks about from that campaign, is the quarter-final, when they played favourites for the tournament, and at that time a star-studded Palmeiras. However, to everyone's surprise, they won 5-0 at home, started making their plans for the semi-final. They were slagging off their opponents, it was joyful. However, they lost 5-1 away to only scrape through 6-5, and at one stage we're going out. We're going for a penalty shootout. So 6-5, that's the game that everyone remembers from that particular campaign. Big Phil won the league again in 96, but as can happen with managers, his departure led to another decline and further relegation. They came up in the mid-O's, and the first season back they finished third, and straight afterwards they got to Libertadores final. Now that's pretty good going, reaching the final after just coming up again. They were thrashed 5-0 in aggregate by Boca. And since then things have been quiet for them. This run was not expected. They've had one cup win in about the last decade, and haven't won the Brazilian title, and haven't got to latter stages of the Libertadores either. So I don't think much was expected of this cup run. So it's two teams who are surprised probably to be there. And again, that's probably not something you'd see in the Champions League, perhaps, which is two rank outsiders who haven't won the tournament in a while and who weren't fancy to get anywhere. Their stadium is fantastic. The Grêmio Stadium, it holds 58,000, was rebuilt for the World Cup, but attendance is very wildly, as they do in Brazil. Sold out against Internacional, but the average is only about 22 or 23,000 for domestic league games. Their star player is Luan, who's interesting Liverpool, and who has already a bid's been received by Lokomotiv Moscow, and several other clubs are tracking him. He's very highly rated, but he's missed a couple of games and they struggle for creativity without him. They also struggle, they play a very patient passing game, but they can struggle against organised, stuffy, pragmatic teams. If teams work them out, they do struggle to create much. It's only, again like a Warburton team, it's only when things going their way and all the stars align, then they really can dish out some beatings. You know, they're a good side, but Lanús, I think, will pose a problem for them, especially with the 4-5-1 away from home, because Lanús aren't adventurous. Lanús won't be looking to open up, and they won't give them the space to create they love playing triangles and third man running and stuff, and I think that would be more difficult for them to do. The Grêmio starts favourites. I think they're bookies' favourites as well, and most of the journalists who write about South American football see them winning, but I actually think Lanús might do it. I am going to predict a riot, and I'm going to predict a Lanús win. Just simply for the matter of if they can hold out in that first leg, I think at home it'll be a cracking atmosphere, and I think they do loosen up at home. They really do attack all guns blazing, and I think that could be a surprise for Grêmio. So I predict 2-1 in aggregate to Lanús, but with my betting average and my betting history, predict a very heavy Grêmio win over 2 legs. Next time we talk for Scot's Thoughts, I'm going to do something a bit different, a bit special. I'm hoping maybe to do a sporting integrity return with some humorous stories from around the globe. And hopefully that'll be something I can turn my attention to as well. But I hope you're primed to go down to bookies tomorrow and put money on Lanús. Brackets, definitely Grêmio. Really, honestly, trust me. And hope you maybe watch for the reports coming in of how the game went. And of course the second leg of the Asian Champions League final is to come. So thanks for joining me. Thanks to David for indulging me. And hopefully this is part of the growing YouTube community and the Heart and Hand community. It's vital, I think, what David's doing, because it gives us a voice, it gives us something to listen to that isn't the mainstream media, it lets Rangers fans talk to Rangers fans, and it provides an outlet and a source for opinions and views from our own kind. So thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you again soon, and this really has been a blast. Thank you.